Welcome to today's webinar, which is our best practice approach to electric fleet sourcing. Thank you very much for joining us. Just before we get started, just to go over a few items you need to know to participate in today's event. Just going to say, actually, Johannes, if you want to go on mute for a second. We're in the same room just so we can have a bit of interaction today. Apologies for that. So we will present for about 30 minutes, and then we'll take about 15 minutes at the end for questions. You'll have the opportunity throughout this session to submit questions, and you can do that by clicking the Q&A button on the control panel at the bottom of the page. As I say, you can send those questions in any time, but we'll wait until that final 15 minutes to collate those and respond to them as we go through. So very quickly, just to introduce myself and Johannes. So my name is Ed Cox. I'm one of the principals at Efficio. And I lead our sustainable procurement practice. So what that means in reality is understanding how we can use the procurement supply chain skill set to really drive better ESG outcomes. So looking at metrics beyond cost, service, etc., to really factor in the push to net zero, as well as other factors around the full ESG agenda, so the governance and social side as well. If I hand over to Johannes.
So I'm Johannes Bartl. I'm a manager with Efficio. I'm usually leading some of the fleet engagements and kind of the internal SME for many of the fleet topics. And together we're gonna walk you through what sustainable sourcing means, and then also how we gonna implement this on fleet sourcing. And as we said, for the questions, please type them in the chat, and we will get to them at the end of the session.
Thanks, Johannes. So if we just start with a very quick introduction to Efficio. So we see ourselves as the largest global specialist supply chain and procurement consultancy. Founded in 2000. We're now over 1,000 professionals globally, with about 50% of our work happening in the UK and Europe. Across 16 offices, across all spend categories, across all activity types, from cost transformation, procurement transformation, operating model, and more around sustainability and sustainable procurement, which takes us to where we are today. In terms of the importance, which I'm sure everyone on this call is aware of around ESG. If we just move forward one slide, Johannes. Our view is really founded on the basis that with the majority of ESG impacts sitting within the supply chain, it's incumbent upon procurement to have an active role in shaping that solution. So how we should be tackling, for example, carbon reduction, how we should be encouraging, supporting, shaping our suppliers to do better and move us towards that agenda. So procurement really being pivotal in the change towards net zero. Some of the drivers on the left, again, many people will be aware of, but the rate of pressure from different points, from governments, from investors, is increasing massively. If we take some statistics here around government policy instruments, so over 200 new policy instruments introduced in 2021, double the amount there were in 2020, and that's continuing to grow. So the real pressure top down to act. Similarly from investors, if we take this view from Bloomberg, that 53 trillion of assets will be labeled as kind of ESG assets by 2025. And in terms of customer pressure, drawing on CDP, the view that 6.4 trillion in purchasing power will be pushing for more sustainable outcomes. So really what we are buying is impacting ESG outcomes longer term. And lastly, around reputational risk. So bodies such as science-based targets, which now over 3,000 large organizations have signed up to really commit to a roadmap and a clear process to achieving net zero. So some of the brief context from our point of view, and if I hand back to Johannes, we'll deep dive into electrification and vehicles.
So how we can put sustainability into practice? So I think what is one of the best categories to tackle first, also from a procurement perspective, is fleet, because fleet can be directly impacted through the procurement department and doesn't require either changes or massive changes from a supplier or a customer point of view. But still, it's a very sensitive topic, and there's always a lot of emotion when it comes to fleet. But on the other side, we also create a lot of awareness and visibility inside the company by switching to electric vehicles, that it shows the people there is actually action taken against the sustainability agenda. But also, if you have like sales representative going to the client side every day, you can also show that, how important the sustainability agenda is there. And this is kind of a business card that you also represent to the outside world, like which vehicles you're driving, or just think about your neighbor that may have an electric car already, and you know which company he's working for. So this is kind of a showcase of a real engagement in sustainable agenda. But still, nevertheless, I think there's three really important things when you want to switch to electric vehicles, and that you always should keep in mind. So first of all, and this is what we also saw in the past with our large clients, so where we had especially on telecoms, and the other one on chemicals, but also many of the smaller companies we are advising these days in this change, and this is kind of what we see across the bank, what's really important. So it's, of course, there needs to be a commitment on sustainability. So this is really something where we need senior leadership engagement and buy-in, because also it will come to a certain cost of effort, of cost in the first case to do this transition. Overall, the TCO will show savings for sure, but it will be definitely lead to change, and where there's change, there needs to be extra effort. And so this is kind of the first thing. Second thing is you want to make sure you're fulfilling your regulatory requirements. It's not only purely on the sustainable commitment, it's also there is laws in place going forward that the politics has, or government has passed, looking at the ending the sales of the combustion engine by 2035. There may be newspaper articles where politicians discussing moving these date further into the future, but I think nevertheless there should be a target for going sustainable, and also even if you would stick to your combustion engine, there's norms like the Euro 3 that clearly tackle what you can emit with a combustion engine. So I think nevertheless it's going to be more and more difficult to drive ICE cars, and that will force you to do that change. So I would say you should try to be ahead of the curve and tackle the sustainability agenda sooner the better. Especially most of what we see, if we benchmark our clients, and always see the industry trend, most of our clients want to reach the 100% electrification by 2030. So you also have to start thinking about it now, as it will take you to some time to phase out your old fleet and get into electrification over the next years. And nevertheless, we should always consider about our internal users, so the ones that will actually drive the vehicles later. And this is kind of the really important people element. So you want to make sure that the people that are impacted by the electrification are actually positive and not creating too much resistance. And I think this is really important, kind of communicating the changes, but then also use levers like having EV ambassadors, giving the people to use a EV maybe also before changing on a test drive for a day or so, to just kind of overcome the stereotypes or any other opinions that people may have a bit of contrary electric vehicles. And that also will prove that for most of the applications, electric vehicles already will do that job, or will soon do that job with the technical development on range. Good. That leads us to kind of the next big step, which is kind of just kind of reflecting on the industry trends. So we know that the automotive industry, as the key producers, have been pretty much impacted by the COVID crisis through the semiconductor shortages, other disruptions in the supply chain. They have not met most of their production targets, therefore, and vehicle demand was still high, but the supplier was kind of scarce. So this led to increased prices and especially longer lead times that our clients experienced. So, but on the other side, I feel these disruption with especially coming from the supply chains and the semiconductor shortages led the automotive industry to even more rapidly change and going forward in their future developments. So we kind of see the industry trends kind of they are just more accelerating in a sense because the OEMs saw what they need to do going forward and now they implement it even quicker. So what we kind of see that the first looking at the OEMs, it's pretty much about shifting the distribution channels. So it's the aim of integrating more the services and the supply network. So this is especially what we see also with the new incumbents coming in, just mentioning Tesla, for instance, where they try to own the whole network. But this is also what we see with the established OEMs, so the likes of BMW, etc. Key reason is that they can kind of enforce their pricing and their marketing strategy better than they did in the past. But there's a huge advantage to this for procurement because now it's one of the few times where we are actually able to negotiate global discounts, while in the past, like the distributor had a large of the pricing power, but now the OEMs are getting more and more involved and are able to enforce discounts on a global level. The next step is kind of becoming mobility providers. So the OEMs and or lease companies expanding the operation beyond just the pure manufacturing and selling. They also want to be like more mobility providers in a wider sense, meaning they are having now more flexible business models. So for instance, they may offer, but they partner up or they may offer charging solutions, short-term car rental, and other consulting services kind of on implementing electric vehicles. I think there's a huge advantage to this because it makes procurement and the HR departments more flexible in offering like more customized solutions to our clients. So meaning, you have people maybe living in a city, they don't need the car the full year, but if they need to travel in certain periods, you can still rent the car for a month, and that offers additional cost savings. Good. Bringing us on to the big data. So we all know that the kind of interconnectivity by vehicles is kind of the new way going forward. So cars are collecting more and more information. I think that was like pretty much shown by the new entrance to the market, how important data is overall. But we also see that there is more and more OEMs stepping on that trend. I think the leaders are definitely the premium brands. The more the volume brands may follow that suit. Also, lease companies are more and more offering it. So what we mean by big data and the collection of data is basically where has your car been? It comes like from where your car has been parked to how often have you so what's the average mileage is not like collected once a month. It can be seen like on a daily basis, either through a dashboard solution, or it can also be exported to do your own analytics. And I think the important thing here is especially when it comes to electric vehicles and hybrid, which can also be intermediate model. It's especially important to understand where have you charged the model. Has the model been charged overnight, which is the most cost efficient part, if people have the opportunity to do that at home at their electric outlet, or people have a tendency to use only the fast charger along the highway, which has the highest cost. So it definitely allows you to kind of track down the usage patterns and kind of get a better behavior on these things.
So presumably that helps you with building the use case around moving to different types of vehicle, be it plug-in hybrid or full EV, and the battery range you might potentially need for that, Johannes.
So I think that also, the usage pattern helps you to kind of detect like what is the usage pattern, and then also kind of find the right suitable model for the different people in the company. So you may then also distinguish between people that are, let's say, sales representatives going only around the city center of London, while you have then maybe more rural areas where people need to go further, and then you can also have the right vehicle, or you can get a vehicle with a longer range. And I think what's also important to note, especially in hybrid vehicles, if you look at it from a sustainability and cost perspective, you have an ICE engine with a battery built in, and you want to make sure that the battery is actually charged as well. Otherwise, you would just carry extra weight around that is kind of not having any positive CO2 impact. So you also want to see if people are actually using these hybrids efficiently and charging ideally. Good. Then we come to the next point of the EV and hybrid adaptation. So we see a clear push from all OEMs now into hybrid as kind of the bridging solution going forward, but then also developing their EV portfolio further and further. I think that we also can see now the battery development is going accordingly. So with like new battery technology available over the next 2 to 3 years, we also will see most likely either an extension in range or shorter charging times, which then also makes it more convenient for users that travel over longer distances. And what we also see on the side of EV and electrification is that the OEMs are either starting to build up their own charging networks or partner with some of the utility companies to build that out, so to make it kind of a seamless user experience. So you have a certain model brand, and they also have their own chargers. Good. Coming to the next industry trends. So kind of looking at the lease market in this sense. So what we are seeing is that lease companies have been undergoing a lot of merger and acquisition over the past years. So what does that mean for us? For instance, the last one that has been changed, the last big merger in the market was LeasePlan being acquired through ALD. So how does this play out? I think from a procurement perspective, it's now possible. So lease markets used to be very scattered, very local on a national level. So that allows us to negotiate like for global deals, kind of better leverage on the total volumes which we have. But I think on the overall merchant acquisition part, the future will also lead if the concentration will get too high at some point and they try to leverage on their market power. So there's a certain risk attached to it. Even the LeasePlan deal was approved through the European Union. So I think the regulators are watching this very closely. But I think for now we should really, as procurement, leverage on the volume discounts we can get globally, and also establish this kind of global supplier relationship. So when it comes to new emission standard, so we already said like the governments are passing more and more laws to make sure that CO2 emissions go down, especially as the NOx emissions. So what we are facing now is the Euro 7 as the next standard to put in place especially in the European Union. So we know with more advanced engine technologies meeting all these criteria, it will be also coming with a certain cost element, which means that internal combustion engine will get more expensive over the coming years. And while electric vehicles are tend to be reducing in price, also as they scale up their production. So what we're gonna see going forward is the trend that electric vehicles will get cheaper in comparison to ICEs, so internal combustion engines. So coming to the next legislative action that the governments took is basically around carbon taxation, credits, and CO2 certificates trading. So of course there is also a CO2 benefit to switch to electric vehicles, especially when it comes to CO2 taxation. So we know that with an increased price for the CO2 emissions, fuel in the future will get more expensive, while the electric price will develop depending on geopolitical but more in a linear way, making it an advantage to have an electric vehicle. Also, I think an interesting thing is CO2 certificate trading. That is something that companies are starting to realize the benefits of it. So basically, for buying electric vehicles and having a lower CO2 emissions, you're actually allowed to trade these emissions. You're freed up on the international market. And the other thing is when it comes to carbon credits. So for instance, Austria is one of the leading countries on carbon credits. So as an individual electric vehicle user, you can get up to 600 euros in carbon credits. So it's kind of a cashback from the government for using an electric vehicle. While for instance, if you drive an internal combustion engine, your fuel cost will increase over the future. So coming to the inflation. So we know inflation has been a pressure, as discussed before, through the different impacts caused by COVID. But I think what we kind of see in the market trend overall, there's a couple of OEMs that are introducing discounts again. And I think if there may be an economic slowdown, this is something definitely to watch for, as once there is more supply than demand on the market, vehicle prices should reduce in the future again. And especially looking at the new incumbent electric vehicle OEMs, they will come to the market. They still have high production capacities. And once they throw that on the market, I think the supply and demand gap that we currently still see will drop and lead times will go down. Which leads us kind of from a next perspective, what should you consider when you roll out the electric vehicles? So I think what you need to consider is how you want to, first of all, what are your sustainability targets? And then it's also where should I start with scaling it up? So ideally, you want to have a mix between a good charging infrastructure and government incentives to drive the TCO cost savings. So what we kind of see is there's, especially Central and Northern Europe are currently leading the change, and it's also important to kind of look for local subsidies when launching or selecting the pilot countries. But also if you want to, you have like a bigger sustainability agenda, you can see which are the countries we can go electric immediately, while for others, you may come up with a plug-in hybrid solution. So for instance, Eastern European countries, traditional, where the electric charging infrastructure is not as mature. And then for a procurement, very like hands-on perspective, how would you usually engage in a sourcing project? So you have basically the definition and market engagement and the transition phase, like in a usual procurement project. Very important in the definition phase to call out is, as we are saying, the change to electric vehicles impacts the people. So you need to definitely be aware, like what is your sustainability agenda? What is the policies that are currently in place, as this is impacting also benefits and salaries of people, or the overall user experience. You need to do then a policy review. And then ideally, since you have always the two elements, if you go for lease option, you always have the OEMs and you have the lease companies, and there is two price points, right? There's the first of all, the OEM price, which you want to know, and then there's the lease cost, which is kind of the markup on top. So ideally, you want to go out to the OEMs, you want to leverage on your global or regional volumes, get the best possible price with the OEMs, take these prices to the lease cost, dictate them kind of their input price, and then you know that their markup is basically a function of financing costs and management fees. So this is why you do a two-phase RFP process. Then you shortlist the suppliers. You make sure that you go through the model selection with the employees, or that the local responsibilities. Also, like local worker councils can play a role there in the selection and switch of the vehicles. And then you go further through the supplier selection. And this comes, and in addition, if you then roll out the electric vehicles, you want to make sure that you also get the electric infrastructure in place. important there is understand the local gap you have in the charging. So it's like, which are the pilot countries you want to go for, understand how many chargers you have in place. So this is usually up to a year that takes for the project, because it then comes really into the detail on how you want to launch it and roll this out. You have a classic RFP process where you engage with the suppliers. And then I think the important thing is the final negotiations should take a little bit more time, because you want to make sure that all the requirements are understood from the local suppliers, especially when it comes to charging infrastructure on site. So for instance, if you have a production site, you want to install 3 chargers, that may be fine. But for an office, if you have to install 15 chargers, you want to make sure that the local grid is supporting these chargers and you don't run into any kind of a blackout. So it's really important to have the suppliers knowing what you're looking for on a local level. And then once they are aware of it, when they give you the final pricing, you can then kind of go to the implementation, which is then usually just a month for contracting and signing. Good, which leads us on time to the question and answer session.
Fantastic. Well done, Johannes. Your voice lasted through that full commentary, so thank you for that. So just a reminder that you can submit any questions through the Q&A button at the bottom of the panel. A couple of questions we have had come in. So the first one is now the right time to adopt EV, or should we wait? Johannes, what are your thoughts there?
So I would say it's definitely important to get the strategy definition in place and knowing your targets. So if you want to start the transition to 2030, I think you should definitely select a pilot country where you roll it out first. I think you're going to do very important learnings in terms of local subsidies, also rolling out the electric infrastructure. So I would definitely say it's now the right time to start it. Also, if we would experience a slowdown in the economy, I think it's also a good point to take advantage of future discounts on the OEM market, but then also looking at the TCO cost in many countries, electric vehicles are definitely beneficial over internal combustion engine. And also, if you just remind that the Euro 7 is coming up in 2025, it's definitely the right time to start now.
Fantastic. And the second question, so what's the biggest pitfall or complexity you see in adopting EV?
I think the largest complexity comes really on a national level. So there is kind of different regulations, as we said, to the CO2 pricing, for instance, or the credit you would get back. Also with the subsidies, you should be aware like how long until when they are going. So what we saw in the past, like Sweden has removed these subsidies. So it's like you should like take advantage once they are going. And then I would say the complexity really comes then more on the charging side of things. So it's relatively easy to switch to electric vehicle, but I think the complexity is around charging infrastructure. So for instance, are people living in a flat with several units? Then it's depending on what charging infrastructure you have available in that street. If people want to park overnight, or charge overnight, which is the most cost-efficient way. If most of your people are living in more rural areas, they have houses, and then it's relatively easy to install like the charger there. Which then just requires you a change in the policy of with the employee and kind of subsidize or lease a charging station. So I think it's really in the rollout on a national and local level that you need to be aware of.
Johannes, quick question from me whilst we wait and see if any further questions come in. So hybrids or plug-in hybrids can often get quite bad press in terms of not really fulfilling on the environmental agenda. What's your view on that? Do they have a part to play in a low carbon strategy?
So I think first of all, I think we should only consider the plugins as a real hybrid. I felt that the mild hybrids are really as bad as their reputation, because the battery is only charged through driving, which shows like a significant lower efficiency, and you have the additional weight which is negative on your fuel consumption. I think we should really focus on the plug-in hybrids, and there I think they can be a useful bridge technology. So it can kind of educate the drivers already on, using chargers overnight, etc. So where they can actually charge the vehicle. But there it's really important to actually enforce an efficient overnight charging, because if they, as we said, because that's where they actually can then drive electric. And this is especially important for short commutes, for using the short commutes, but also can be useful for people that need to drive larger distances on a regular race, or where you have like countries which are not as developed charging infrastructure. So it's kind of a first step, but it will not replace electric vehicles in the long run.
Thank you. A further question: is it possible for a company to recover residual value from high value components such as batteries as an EV reaches the end of its life cycle to increase the savings of moving to electric?
I think that's a bit of a tricky one, what we currently see. I think what we are more looking at, so usually companies keep their cars for 4 years, which is not the end of the life of the battery. Usually we would almost think about the lifetime of an electric vehicle between 10 and 12 years currently. So I think it's less about getting the residual value. But I think what's interesting going to be going forward is, since we had lower production volumes now, this also plays a role in the used car market. So what we definitely going to see is, with new regulations, new CO2 tax coming in place, that the residual value for used electric cars will be higher, and therefore factor into the TCO, and compared to ICEs that will decline in value based on governmental taxation.
Okay. And I think there's some interesting approaches developing in the market as well. So I think some manufacturers are looking to take back the batteries and then use them for battery storage purposes. So when they maybe don't have the same level of charge storage that you'd require in a vehicle, they can consolidate them to have them as on-site battery storage or grid supplementary storage, which I think is quite a nice idea. Another question, Johannes: can you recommend any fleet management platforms to support the green fleet transition, including optimizing and emission reporting, that would be suitable for a global company with fleet from many different lease companies? Now, that may be putting you on the spot with a quite specific question, but
yeah,
anything to mind?
No, I would say we, at the top of the hand, there's no card, no company to recommend. I think it's really for fleet management companies. I think it also can be like, as a classic procurement exercise, you do it, then you test the capabilities, and then it really comes back to which local requirements you have. So are they able to share the platforms between different suppliers, or how they kind of are able to integrate these into the system?
I think we've got your details, and if we have any more detailed answer to that, we'll get back to you directly. Okay. No further questions coming in for now. So I think we will wrap up there. So thank you everyone for joining. We hopefully that whistle stop tour was useful and prompted a few thoughts, and perhaps supported you on your journey to greater EV fleet adoption and support your net zero pathways. So thank you, Johannes, for that. And if we could just ask that once you leave the webinar today, you will be directed to a brief survey. So it'd be really appreciated if you could complete that for us and provide any feedback. And we'll also send you a short follow-up email in the next day or so with a recording to today's webinar, so you can review that in your own time. So thank you very much all, and hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.